Hello, friends. We're here with Professor Margot Anderson from the University of Milwaukee.
Mhm.
And she is the person who knows about the census, but the census that you don't know is the historical census. And we're so happy to have you here for La Familia de Broward. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
And she's gonna let us know some stories that you maybe, and I'm sure maybe you don't never heard. And we're gonna start about tell us about the census back in the day.
Okay.
The questions that we didn't know exist.
Okay. The United States has been doing a census in 1790, and so there's a very long history. But
Wow.
I've been asked today to sort of talk a little bit about its relevance to sort of Hispanics and Latinos. And
Yes.
one of the sort of important incidents is in about 1930, the Census Bureau decided that they were going to ask about Mexicans, and before that they had identified Mexicans on the census through their place of birth or their parental birth or place of birth, because those were both questions. But they decided in 1930 to make it a race question and ask as a category for a race. It turned out that didn't go well with the Mexican American community at the time, and that people were resisted it and weren't very happy with it, and the Mexican government also was not very happy, so it went off in 1940.
But what was the question? Sorry.
The question said, what is your race? And you were given options that said white, black, American Indian, Asian, but you also had a category, just for 1930, the only time, of Mexican.
Wow,
Yes.
like if Mexican is a race.
That was the effort, yes.
Wow, so it got off.
It went off and never came back. The State Department, as I said, fielded complaints from the Mexican government throughout the decade of the 1930s, and the Census Bureau thought better of it and took it off in 1940 and reverted to the way that they had identified Mexicans to that point, which is through the birthplace and birthplace of parents questions.
Exactly. So going further, you told us about the other very interesting tips and what happened when the United States bought Philippines, you told me, Puerto Rico, and
Cuba.
Cuba.
Yeah. After the Spanish-American War, Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the Philippines, among others, became American possessions. And so the United States government decided to take censuses in those areas for the first time. Obviously, the Cuba became independent, and so there is a Cuban census that was collected and published by the American government in the early 20th century, as well as the Philippine census.
Wow.
But the Puerto Rican census has continued ever since, of course, because Puerto Rico remains in United States territory.
Oh, very interesting. We know that some stories behind the scenes, some tips, some things that we now will say, wow, that was in the census. So tell us about that from that historical period to today. We're going to have a 2020 census, so that's why we are here interviewing Margot. So tell us more interesting stories and what happened right now.
Well, the last 30, 40 years, obviously, the question of the explosive growth of the Hispanic and Latino populations has been very much on the mind of American statisticians and census takers. And so starting in the 1970s, in particular, the Hispanic Latino communities in the United States began to sort of say, we want better data. 1970, they tried to identify the Hispanic Latino community through surname, believe it or not.
Oh,
right,
wow.
Which didn't work very well.
Okay.
So in the 70s, the federal government, not just the Census Bureau, created the question that we now is all on federal forms today that says, are you Hispanic or Latino, yes or no? And if you say yes, then you get a series of other questions of like, what is your ethnic background? Are you from Latin America? Are you from Cuba? Are you Dominican? So forth. And so that we've continued on, and will show up again in the 2020 census.
2026,
Yeah.
that's what we're looking for, right?
Yes, that's what you're looking for.
Thank you, Professor Anderson, to talk to. It's not going to be the last time, so
No,
thank you
right.
for there are many other stories that we're going to address in other videos, that like general questions that you won't believe that it was in the census, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.